Hello everyone, Meme here, and what the fuck is this?
What?
Nintendo, the company that hasn't changed their online service connection in about a decade. Nintendo is like that one stepdad who your mom swears loves you, but you know deep down that he's planning to kill you to take a life insurance claim out of you. Nintendo is notoriously very stingy, and many can easily observe that there is a massive disconnect between them and their own fans. Pikmin 4? Nah. Events created and hosted by fans? You're joking. Actually just playing a few seconds of their music. People were already aware of Nintendo's huge fan disconnect, and it was already made more apparent with the painful launch of the Switch, when Nintendo basically told fans to suck it up while their Switch was basically having the video game equivalent of a stroke. Of course, fans came to slowly tolerate Nintendo over time, and with Mario's 35th anniversary underway, maybe Nintendo was finally willing to listen and give back to the fans. You see, what fans have been waiting for was more legacy content from Nintendo, old games finally being brought onto a newer system, and without the subscription service paywall. The fans, also aware of Mario's next big milestone, wanted something big. They wanted another game like the original Super Mario All-Stars collection. They wanted Nintendo to bring another lineup of games, but this time the 3D Mario games. It was apparent that the Switch could easily handle the package, and hey, who knows, maybe Nintendo could probably brush the dust off and give them a new coat of paint. Maybe even completely remastering them for a new generation of Nintendo gamers. At this point, with the anniversary right around the corner, people knew that Nintendo was planning something big. With no news or updates from the company, something was definitely coming. Nintendo YouTubers like Scott the Woz were even already predicting what this supposed All-Stars game could be like. So, when the day finally came, people were excited. At this point, word had already gotten around that 3D All-Stars would be coming, and people were ready. Super Mario 64, Sunshine, Galaxies 1 and 2, it was a package too good to be true. And that, unfortunately, is because it was too good to be true.
The next one will be our last announcement.
It's me, Mario!
When the Nintendo Direct dropped, people weren't pleased. As a matter of fact, more people seemed to be more upset than happy. But why, Meme, I hear you all asking? Isn't it one of the biggest drops of legacy content with 3 massive 3D Mario titles no one ever thought would reach the modern gaming era? Well, yeah, it was and still is one of the biggest legacy content drops by Nintendo. Everyone was pleased to some degree knowing that these games were revived and put into the hands of gamers young and old. But that's not the issue. The issues arise already within the price of the game itself. $60 for games between 24 and 13 years old is absolutely ridiculous. For a comparison, I actually bought a refurbished Nintendo 64 along with Mario 64 and Ocarina of Time with 2 controllers for only $200. The Nintendo Switch gaming system by itself costs $200 to $300, meaning that at most, for 3 old and poorly ported games, this should have cost $40 at most, and even that's pushing it. 3D All-Stars is not a AAA game, and I think that a more reasonable price would have been around $30. So why isn't it worth $60? I mean, yeah, these games are old, but it's a 3-in-1 package, and you can't really find these games anywhere else unless you search on retro game sites and eBay. Well, the reason the $60 price tag isn't worth it is for 2 main reasons. One, the games weren't changed or updated for the new generation at all, making the game seem dated at best and boring and really obnoxious at worst. The best we got in terms of a remaster was a resolution increase, and that's honestly about it. But I'll get into the games themselves later. The second main reason it isn't worth it is because the games are all we got. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, what you're seeing right now is all 3D All-Stars has to offer. 2 menus, some music, and then the games. One could argue that the original All-Stars had this as well. However, unlike 3D All-Stars, the original All-Stars had the games overhauled for the new system and hardware, and quality and charm was exhibited all throughout the collection. And if that wasn't enough for you, the All-Stars re-release for the Wii saw a full physical release for the 25th anniversary of Mario, fit with an art book and a CD of all the music included. What does 3D All-Stars come with? Well, nothing. As a matter of fact, I would argue that Nintendo got really fucking lazy. The box art is uninspired, and the inside art looks like a half-assed art project by a 5th grader. The game just screams we don't give a fuck, and we haven't even touched any of the games in the actual collection. Of course, the main reason why everyone is at arms with Nintendo over the game is because of the unwarranted limited release date on it. This point has been talked to death, so I'll make it brief. Basically, Nintendo, knowing that they've created a half-assed game that wouldn't draw in much profit after the initial release, decided to pull an extremely scummy corporate move and slap a limited release date on to practically beg for the consumers to buy their game. The ethics of this move is obviously very fucked, and doing so during a health crisis where many families can barely afford rent and food, let alone a horrible $60 game for their kid, is really scummy, and Nintendo should seriously be ashamed. Anyway, now that we've finally moved past everything just on the surface level, let's actually look at the game contents, beginning with the first game in the collection.
It's me, Mario!
The first game in the collection is Super Mario 64, but before we can begin to understand the flaws with the re-release version, we have to understand what made the original so good. Super Mario 64 was released in 1996 to critical acclaim on the Nintendo 64 home console. The game was hailed by critics and fans alike for Mario's tremendous debut into the third dimension. The levels were all unique and expansive, themed and inspired, and Mario 64 made great use of the analog stick, varied movement in the game, and the castle, which acted as a connecting hub for all levels in the game. This was also the first mainline non-linear Mario title, which saw you collecting stars instead of grabbing a flagpole. This game, its premise, and its use of the third dimension undoubtedly created the basis of which 3D gaming would stand on even today. Today, we still see the remnants of what Mario 64 left us with. In the Grand Theft Auto games, we run around completing a variety of missions in a non-linear format. In Batman Arkham Knight, we use the large movement set given to us to maneuver around the city in whatever way we see fit. The game has inspired so many games in its wake, and it really well deserves the title of one of the best video games of all time. Now, just moving away from the game itself, the community. It's massive, and it still thrives today with the still ever-expanding speedrun community, and with yet-to-be-solved gaming mysteries. Like I said earlier, I bought a refurbished Nintendo 64 along with a copy of Super Mario 64 to see what was up. And upon playing it, I must say I was really impressed, even after all these years and decades of games following it. The world is surprisingly big, and the levels are bigger, and the castle slowly unlocks as you progress, which, in my opinion, is still one of the best progression systems in any video game. The Nintendo 64 controller felt really good in my hands, surprisingly enough, and controlling Mario with this thing felt really satisfying. You seriously just have to play the original with the controller to see what I mean. With all that said, I still only had just a few common complaints, such as the camera, the lag, random invisible walls being kicked out of levels, and occasional jank-ass level design. Now, almost 2.5 decades later, this 3D remastered collection, which includes Mario 64, is announced. When the All-Stars title was used previously, we got completely remade and remastered versions of classics on a different hardware. Considering that Mario 64 fan-made overhaul mods were already available on the PC, some would reasonably expect Mario 64 to not only be patched and fixed, but also be overhauled with a new engine and with new physics. I mean, honestly, I wouldn't have been opposed to Mario 64 being remade on the engine that was used for Super Mario Odyssey, but fans just wanted something fresh and new for the new generation of Switch gamers that have never played Mario 64, let alone Sunshine or Galaxy. Fast forward to the release, and nothing has changed. What the fuck?! As a matter of fact, Nintendo took a huge step backwards by emulating and porting the least popular version of Mario 64, the Japan-only Shindu version of the game, which was the patched version of Mario 64, only released in Japan at the time in 1997. But meme, how is it a step backwards if they used the fixed version? Well, my friend, you pretty much just answered my question. I mean, don't you find it a little bit lazy that instead of optimizing the game and suiting it better for the Nintendo Switch, they just took a pre-existing version of the original game that many people disliked, mind you, and emulated it and ported it for the Switch? I mean, come on, Nintendo, if you're not even going to be fucked to actually remaster the game, please at least just give us the original version of Mario 64, because, while not a big deal, This version of the game removed backwards long jumps, and Mario wraps around poles further when he's running into them.
Oh, he wraps so far around the tree, it's so gross.
Which turned off a fair bit of the speedrun community, once again showing Nintendo's massive disconnect with their own fan base. However, this isn't the only issue with Mario 64, there is so much more.
So much pain!
A major complaint people have with 64 would be the fact that it is still in its original ratio 4:3, which obviously doesn't fill the entirety of the Switch's screen, leaving black bars on the sides. Again, not necessarily a very large point to be made, but it just goes to show how lazy it makes Nintendo look, and it very clearly shows how little of a shit they gave about this collection. Another complaint, for me at least, is how poorly optimized this game is for the Switch. The original Mario 64, like I said earlier, relied on the Nintendo 64 controller and practically required you to use that controller specifically to get the most out of the experience. The Switch controller is obviously not optimized at all for the original Super Mario 64, and in my personal opinion it feels terrible to control Mario. The terrible, and now inverted for some reason, camera is controlled by the right analog stick, which is very awkward because of the size of the analog stick. I found myself accidentally going into first person and making the camera go places I didn't want it to go way too often. I mean, seriously, it's like playing Call of Duty on the DS. Oh wait. Speaking of the analog stick, it does not feel good to move Mario in general. Mario's movements just feel too wide and large compared to the small and tight movements of the left analog stick. It creates this weird disconnect between the player and Mario, and I get frustrated because I feel like I can never get Mario to go where I want him to go. The buttons, as well, are obviously very tiny, and compared to the original 64's two B and A buttons, it's just a cluttered and confusing mess when you're trying to control Mario. And I honestly feel bad for new players because the learning curve will be much larger in comparison to people who picked up the game on the original Nintendo 64. To reiterate, this is an emulation, meaning practically nothing was changed, including the audio. Again, while not a big deal, it's very disappointing to hear these low-quality voice clips and sound effects.
It's me, Mario!
The music is unchanged as well, and while the music definitely still slaps, it's annoying to me that Nintendo just didn't give enough of a fuck to at least change some of the tracks around so I didn't have to listen to Bob-omb Battlefield every 2 stages. Keep in mind, this is the same company who created a unique music track for every theme and style of Mario game specifically for Super Mario Maker 2. For fuck's sake, they even remade and re-recorded Bob-omb Battlefield's music for Super Mario Galaxy 2. The Super Mario Galaxy 2 example especially gets me mad because this entire level is what we could have had in 3D All-Stars, but Nintendo was just so lazy that they weren't even bothered to go that extra mile for one game.
Super Mario Sunshine! Woohoo!
Released in July of 2002 on the Nintendo GameCube, Super Mario Sunshine was the second mainline 3D Mario game. For many, Super Mario Sunshine is considered a beloved, albeit campy game with fun gimmicks, fluid movement, and great level design. Although this game also tends to be very divisive within the Mario community, with Mario fans tending to either love or hate the game with no in-between. Super Mario Sunshine was definitely one of the more experimental games in the mainline series, and while I personally didn't necessarily enjoy it, I still understand the appeal. The game is just dumb and cheesy summertime Mario fun, and the only people who could ever hate cheesy summertime Mario fun have no soul. Anyway, like we did in the previous segment, we will identify first what made Sunshine so great, and we will then explore how the 3D All-Stars release of the game could have fallen short. Super Mario Sunshine was the officially Nintendo-confirmed sequel to Mario 64, and took many of the ideas from Super Mario 64 and heavily built off of it. A lot of what makes this game good and appealing in the first place is in large part thanks to the revolutionary design of 64. However, Sunshine does have a few quirks of its own that, while for many they're very divisive and can make or break the Sunshine experience, they're generally considered a welcome and fun addition. One of the major quirks includes the Flood gadget, courtesy of Professor E. Gadd. This new tool allows Mario to gather and spray water using a spray nozzle or float in the air with a hover nozzle. Just like how the caps in Super Mario 64 replaced power-ups, there are different nozzles Mario can attach to FLUDD which act as upgrades, replacing power-ups and caps from Sunshine's predecessor. Another big quirk that's unique to Sunshine would probably be the special zones, which take away Mario's primary gadget and force the player to apply what they know about Mario's base moveset through a gauntlet of platforming challenges. These zones are usually pretty difficult, but also pretty fun overall. I didn't feel like these sections took away from the pace or fun of the game at all, and I actually think it's pretty smart for Nintendo to include these short and incredibly adrenaline-filling platforming sections to take the player's attention away from the slower, FLUDD-heavy sections of the game, just for a little while. I would definitely equate these sections to being like the junk food of Super Mario Sunshine. Sunshine was also the first and only Mario game to have blue coins, which in this game are used to trade for shines. I suppose this is the Sunshine variation of the Castle Secret Stars from Mario 64, and the closest we've come to this blue coin system ever since was probably in Odyssey with the ability to buy power moons. While, yes, for many, even hardcore Sunshine fans, these blue coins are incredibly obnoxious, I really do kinda wish Nintendo would revisit this idea in a future Mario title.
You what?
As I do think that it is a good concept on paper. Sunshine, however, obviously wasn't perfect, and I did have a few common complaints about the game, even if they were few and far in between. I personally didn't like how Sunshine was somehow even more linear, only being able to access one shine at a time, one after another. It also doesn't help very much that you still get kicked out of levels in this game, which was probably the primary complaint for everyone from Super Mario 64. Then there's also the fact that this fucking hellscape exists, and the voice acting in the game just sounds like performing arts college dropouts on a good day.
Mama Peach, I'm your mama?
I have a rope here.
Oh, do you? Well, then I'll try to go down using the rope.
Of course, these are just minor complaints, and don't take away from what is, at the end of the day, a very solid and very fun, cheesy game. Now that we know what made Sunshine great, let's see how Nintendo fell short. A lot of the complaints I have with Sunshine can be easily grouped in with what I found wrong with Super Mario 64, such as inverted controls and poor emulation. However, and rather unfortunately, Sunshine seems to be the worst and most poorly optimized game for the Switch. For some reason, Nintendo decided it would be really sick to get extra lazy and emulate Sunshine very poorly. Somehow even worse than Galaxy in Super Mario 64. I'm sure, as you all already know by now, there is a very damning piece of evidence to suggest poor emulation for Sunshine, which was the fact that there are debug boxes for the platforms in some of the special zones as seen in this clip here. Emulators are nowhere near my specialty, but to put it in layman's terms, Nintendo allegedly used the Dolphin emulator for Sunshine, which is an unofficial emulation hardware that not only everyone can use, but everyone can use to make Sunshine run better than what Nintendo gave us for $60. Again, I know nothing about emulation, and to get more info regarding the technical aspects of 3D All-Stars, rather than my subjective opinion, I would highly recommend King K's video on 3D All-Stars. I've been using clips from his video, and it's very well made. There is also the fact that since this is an emulation in its most pure and basic form using unofficial software, pretty much nothing about Sunshine was changed from the original GameCube version, besides what I guess Nintendo considers the bare minimum, of which being resolution and HUD graphics. Besides that, all of Sunshine's glitches and shortcomings are still present, such as, I don't know, this. Or, hey, how about that? There's so much that could have been done with Sunshine, so many glitches, bad levels, and played out gimmicks that could have been improved to make it feel more modern, a little faster, and a little bit more fun for the new generation of Nintendo fans. But unfortunately, since Nintendo is lazy and only wants your money,
Hello, I like money.
this game unfortunately falls flat on its face and feels slow, dated, and with blatant emulation, disingenuous. Now that we're done looking at and analyzing Sunshine's shortcomings, let's look at the final game in the collection. Released in November of 2007 for the Nintendo Wii, Super Mario Galaxy was the official third installment in the mainline 3D Mario games, and one of the most beloved at that. In this new Mario adventure, we see Mario shoot to the stars in order to rescue the Princess Peach, who's been abducted by Bowser once again, this time in style. This Mario game is definitely not your granddaddy's Mario game, and was a smash hit for probably all of the wrong reasons, breaking every conventional Mario rule one after another, and cementing itself into the minds of an entire generation of Nintendo fans, including myself. This, ladies and gentlemen, is Super Mario done right, and in the next section, just like the ones previously, we're going to explore how Nintendo managed to craft such a perfect game. Interestingly enough, Mario Galaxy isn't a very movement-heavy game. Unlike in Mario 64 and Sunshine where you can dive, Mario Galaxy doesn't allow Mario to dive, instead deciding to replace this mechanic with Mario's new move, the spin. Besides the dive, Mario's moveset is surprisingly incredibly stiff, with limp dick long jumps barely giving any initial speed and halting on a dime upon landing, to side flips locking Mario in place and giving very little horizontal speed, and with the spin not even really being designed as a movement option, taking away all momentum and only giving a slight boost in height. So I hear you all asking, how does Galaxy manage to be even more of a smash hit than Sunshine when its movement is somehow even more stiff and limited? Isn't that half of the appeal of most Mario games? Yes, my friend, you are absolutely correct in that assumption, and so that's why Nintendo does something truly brilliant here and attempts to make up for a major lack of the game's appeal by pretty much overhauling the setting Mario is in, completely changing the meaning of what 3D Mario is in the first place. Super Mario Galaxy stands on one of a few main pillars to keep the game interesting while also limiting what the player is actually capable of. These pillars are theme, gimmicks, and setting. The theme of Mario Galaxy is drastically very different from the other two 3D Mario games. Mario 64 was bright, in-your-face, cheery, packed with life, and occasionally fucking terrifying. Mario Sunshine was more relaxed, but still very fun and cheerful with a tropical twist. Super Mario Galaxy, however, is very thematically different. Galaxy is intense, it's cinematic, and occasionally really depressing with a large looming sense of isolation and loneliness. Mario is rarely accompanied by anyone outside of the observatory, and is constantly engulfed and surrounded in the black void of space. Basically, while 64 and Sunshine are both happy and cheerful, Galaxy is sad and intense, which is especially intriguing to veteran Mario players and new Mario players who are fascinated with this emotional appeal. There are also many gimmicks in Mario Galaxy that are spread throughout the entirety of the game, whether it be power-ups being designated to only one galaxy, or game mechanics that are sometimes only present in one level. Mario Galaxy makes up for restricted and linear movement by including gimmicks that make the game feel faster through the introduction of many different ideas that were so vast that Miyamoto had to make an entire other fucking game to showcase the rest of them in. There's so many different mechanics and gimmicks in this game, from the spin itself, to moving platforms, to bee costumes, to squid surfing, to constantly flipping gravity, to the iconic star blasters that launch Mario seamlessly from planet to planet. This game is the game that truly never stops giving. All of these ideas work together harmoniously to keep the attention of the player while also not seeming too outlandish, mostly because of the setting. The setting of Mario Galaxy is, well, space, and since Galaxy takes place in space, there's a lot Mario Galaxy can do to bend the rules and create an out-of-this-world setting that taps into the deepest parts of our imagination. The settings of Mario Galaxy are truly magical, from floating water galaxies to high-velocity wind galaxies to galaxies literally made out of toys. This game seeks to create entire worlds and galaxies with their own stories, rules, gimmicks, mechanics, feelings, pacing, and characters. Gusty Garden Galaxy is intense, fast, heart-racing, with a soundtrack that reflects the themes of the galaxy just as well. One of the many roads to Bowser, which mostly are a big homage to Mario 64, are intense, terrifying, perilous, a little bit slow-paced, but still filled with action. which also feel almost the exact same as the Mario 64 roads to Bowser, and Galaxy even uses a remade version of the song to replicate this feeling. So again, while Mario is still limited in movement, these settings can create the illusion of movement, making Mario either feel fast or slow given his environment. Yes, while these pillars can also play a role in making this game feel very linear and one-directional, I believe this game had to make that sacrifice, as I'd honestly rather the game be a little bit more linear instead of just doing a bunch of limp dick long jumps across massive fields, feeling like I'm making no real progress. Besides the light criticism of linearity in what is considered a mainline 3D Mario game, this game is near damn perfect, with theming and settings that we haven't seen since Odyssey, and even that game is second to Galaxy in my opinion. Also, forgot to mention, this game came out on the Nintendo motherfucking Wii! And the designers clearly had a goddamn field day when figuring out how motion controls would play a part in this game. You can spin by shaking the remote, the sounds of the Star Blaster soaring through space and committing first-degree murder can all be heard through the remote, and shooting and collecting star bits is all controlled with the Wii Remote, which really makes you feel like Mario. Basically, this game set a very high standard for future Mario games, and even became the building blocks for similar games such as Super Mario 3D Land and Super Mario 3D World. And in all honesty, Nintendo didn't really have to do much to change what already was an incredible game. So what did they do? This hurts. My disappointment is immeasurable. And my day is ruined. There is one very, very large glaring issue that Nintendo didn't even really bother to address in the 3D All-Stars re-release, and that is the motion controls. Mario Galaxy is practically unplayable in handheld mode, as since the Switch obviously doesn't come with a motion bar sensor and wasn't built with motion controls as the priority mechanic like the Wii, the game has a hard time figuring out where the fucking Joy-Con is actually pointing. Quick editor's note, it technically has motion controls as it was built with a gyroscope, which is what that black bar at the bottom is. But again, it's not very precise, and again, the Switch wasn't built with motion controls in mind, so it's not very precise, and it's still very hard to play Mario Galaxy with the Joy-Cons. Which has some really sick results, such as the pointer straight up disappearing, or making me break my arm in 5 fucking places. God forbid I want the pointer to even just appear on the screen. You know how the Switch doesn't come with a stylus? Yeah, and even games like Mario Maker 2 allocate certain buttons so that way the very finicky and uncomfortable touch controls aren't mandated. Yeah, so what the fuck is this, Nintendo? Rather unfortunately, Nintendo pulls a Wii U on our ass and makes us play in this really weird, what I like to call a switch claw position, in order to collect and shoot star bits. While it may not take away from the Galaxy experience, it really just doesn't feel that great to play. And I don't know, it just takes away from the magic that the original Galaxy gave millions of people all over the world. Again, there's a lot they could have done here. I can think of a few ways they could have allocated different buttons or controls for the star bits without having to ham-fist motion controls or make you use touch controls. But again, this was just a half-assed emulation and a poor porting job, and I don't really think Nintendo would have taken the time or care to do anything like that anyway. Now, I'm pretty sure this video is already incredibly long, so I'll do you all a big favor and make this very brief. This, for what it's worth and what it gives you, ignoring the games themselves for a second, is not a good collection. Don't be fooled by the critical reviews. This game really is not worth $60 for what it gives you. Poor emulation, high prices, limited release, lazy porting, uninspired box art design, nothing coming with the game outside of a couple of menus, blatant lack of respect for the games, and just a disappointing and sad lack of content, care, or effort. This isn't the way to celebrate Mario's 35th anniversary. This, in every aspect, screams rushed, lazy, and poor content. pushed out to the masses just in time for the holidays in order to capitalize off of rare, limited-time-only legacy content from a large IP like Mario. I think it's important that we don't allow Nintendo to keep up these kinds of business practices while dealing with such a beloved and endeared franchise on his 35th fucking birthday. In short, this collection truly is just not good compared to what is already out there. However, I don't blame anyone who wasn't fortunate enough or old enough at the time to have bought or experienced these games when they were released. Like I said earlier, Sunshine had never been released outside of the GameCube, and so I don't really blame anyone for wanting to experience Sunshine, let alone 64 or Galaxy, at the convenience of having them all in one big package. It's nice. And it eliminates the reason for having to do what I did and buying a Nintendo 64 just for the purpose of playing Mario 64. I'm just trying to call on Nintendo to stop this type of business practice, and I'm calling on Nintendo fans to stop endorsing and defending this type of behavior from the company. As a matter of fact, Nintendo just recently announced a $60 remaster of just Skyward Sword, mind you, a very old Wii game, for Zelda's upcoming 35th anniversary, which just shows us and Nintendo that they think this type of behavior is okay. I hope that this video teaches any Nintendo fans, Switch owners, or random people stopping by, hi by the way, that Nintendo isn't as great a company as we all thought they were.